Today's webinar is on what's new in GP 2018 R2. Our agenda for today is a quick introduction. I'll talk quickly about some of the technical updates and system requirements, and then followed by Brittany and Tammy, who are providing a live showcase of some of the cool stuff in GP 2018 R2. For those that are new to Endeavour, we are now in our 30th year. So we'll be having celebrations later this year, supporting Microsoft Dynamics, GP, ERP, CRM, cloud, and all of the variety of tools to help make your business better. We're up to 550 clients across Canada and parts of the US, supporting out of Toronto, Halifax, Montreal, Edmonton, Ottawa, and remotely across the US. You can visit our team online. We have two domains. Our core domain on endeavorsolutions.ca for GP, ERP, cloud consulting and integrations, and a new domain for our CRM team focusing on Dynamics 365, CRM and cloud applications at endeavor365.ca. Before going further, I do want to make sure, I always love talking about the GP 2018 roadmap. Every year we've been hitting the milestones for the last 10 years. Always been true to the release dates and launch dates for new versions of GP. Each version gets 5 years on the standard support, and then there's extended support, and as always, Endeavour will continue to support you no matter what version you are. Exciting enough, we do have some clients still running GP 2010 and GP 2013.
And GP 10.
And GP 10. I think those were floppy disks back in GP 10 days.
That's GP 8, come on. We're not old enough to know those anyways, Scott.
You got it. So GP Next is most likely going to be later this year, usually late fall, and it's up to the Microsoft team if they're going to call it GP 2019, or like many of the trendy people, they'll just jump to GP 2020 because it has that beautiful ring to it. System requirements. So as I mentioned, some of the older versions are now no longer supported. GP 2013 and GP 2013 R2 are off of mainstream support. Yes, there is extended support, and Endeavour will continue to support that. What that means is for the people that were running Canadian payroll, there was no more payroll updates for GP 2013, and also they'll stop releasing non-critically critical releases for security patches. Being off of mainstream support also often infringes best practices for a number of organizations. So those that may be ISO certified or public organizations, there's usually some sort of corporate business standard around only using supported software by the manufacturer, and therefore being out of support is a no-no. So with that in mind, GP 2015 is coming to end of mainstream support April of next year. And then I also have listed here some of the server requirements and SQL Server requirements. So those that are looking to move to GP 2018 or GP 2018 R2, which we are now actively recommending, you're going to need a little bit more RAM on your server. It will still work with SQL Server or Windows Server 2012. Some of those may have to upgrade if you had an older Windows server, and the new SQL Server as well. If you're current on enhancements and software assurance for your various products, then it's really just a little bit of extra effort on our team to help you upgrade. That being said, some clients do want to consider looking at private cloud or other cloud options. Those include bigger, better hardware, bigger, better memory, as well as the Windows Server and SQL Server CALs for those GP users. That's another discussion. Feel free to reach out to support or myself or others at the Endeavour team, and we can point you in the right direction to understand if the cloud is right for you and your organization. So now I'm going to pass it over to Brittany and Tammy. Brittany, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then Tammy, why don't you introduce yourself now, and then we'll transition when those times come.
All right. So my name is Brittany. I am the support manager here at Endeavour. I'm sure some of you have talked to me before. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave that up to you. As Scott said, I also have my colleague here, Tammy, and I'll let Tammy introduce herself before she thinks I'm crazy.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Scott. I'm Tammy Dewberry. I'm one of the newest members of the Endeavour team. Happy to be here. You'll see me on projects and also helping out in support, and looking forward to working with every one of you. Thank you.
And Tammy does have a long history in GP, and we're glad to have borrowed her, stole her, won her over.
Won me over.
Won her over.
Charm.
Yeah.
Endeavour charm.
Well, let's not age her with how long she's known GP, you know?
Never, never.
All right. In that case, let's get on to what's new in GP. We're here to tell you a little bit what's going to make your life a little bit easier in GP. And no, unfortunately, GP will not be telling you what Friday's winning lottery ticket numbers are to make your life easier. I wish it did, but unfortunately it's not. So let's talk about some other things. I want to talk about our first thing is actually document attach. We saw this introduced to us in GP 2013 where we could actually use this little attach paperclip button at the top. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up an invoice here. So previously we saw this document attach button where we could attach most files, and these were actually different than our prior OLE notes, that these got attached right into the SQL Server. We didn't have to worry about Active Directory security to those folder locations. These files are getting saved directly in the SQL Server, so they're a little safer, okay? And in some instances, we can also email them out if you have workflow going. If anyone's excited about workflow, Tammy will be talking about workflow in a bit. So I'm excited to say in GP 2018, they added that document attach window to a lot more windows, including the journal entry window, which a lot of people were excited to see and didn't have them. Because, of course, we want to do those adjusting entries. We want to know why we're doing them, or at least have some backup so people don't go, why on earth are they making those entries? They seem a little, you know, kind of out there. So we have the document attach window in new windows in GP 2018. If you do want to know specifically which windows, there is a listing of them, and we can provide them, and they will be posted on our website as well. All right. For those of you who love your inquiry windows, I love them. I'll be honest. I'm a little old school. I still want to see them. Okay, so I'm just pulling my typical receivable transaction entry. If anyone used to use a trick that used your document date as your document and left it at 0 to redisplay it to sort it in by date, they also have these fun sort by in the receivable transaction inquiry, and of course the payables inquiries as well. For the document date, the amount, you can sort them in a bunch of different ways, which is nice. So we don't have to use that old hack of go by document date and hit redisplay to get it to go in document date order. Because of course, we didn't have the sort by options in our prior version. We saw this first come out in 2016, but they didn't give us a whole lot of options. So good for them for giving us some options. Now, if your other way of finding information is SmartList, which is also one of my favorites, and if you make these beautiful SmartLists for yourself and you think they're amazing, but you're a little selfish like me and you go, I don't want anyone to change anything on my SmartList, guess what? We can now put passwords on those SmartLists. If I build that beautiful SmartList and I love it and I think it's great, you'll notice that you have this password button here. So you can actually publish it out to everyone, but put that password on there so no one can change it. They can't change your column sorts. They can't change the columns you have. Okay? You can have that information. It used to be previously if you said you don't want anyone to change your information, we would have advised you to say just to make this available to yourself. You can now make this available to your company, to your system, but put that password on there for password protection. No one's going to be changing your stuff. It's going to be beautiful until you decide to change it. As a side tip and trick, I always like to let people know. For those of you who like to go back and forth between the GL and subledger, I have some favorite columns here. I'm actually in my financial account transactions. This is what's going to show us what happened in our GL. There's these fun columns, these 3 columns that I always like to tell people just because it helps us out. If you want to know what original invoice or vendor or customer that created it, we actually have these originating master name, master ID, and document number. Another one of the new features as well that came in GP 2016 is that you can actually use your control and select multiple columns now at once. Okay. If you add those originating master IDs, you can now see from my sales, I can see that it was my executive resources that actually made this transaction happen. Okay. So and the original document number, the original invoice number that happened for these. So this is an old trick, but it's an oldie but a goodie, and I can't help to not share with you guys. All right. I can go on about SmartList all day, but Scott might give me trouble later and say, Brittany, you need to move on with GP 2018. So let's move on to some other new features.
Thanks, Brittany.
I'm always thinking of you, Scott, don't worry. All right. Let's talk about those customers still, because I really want to pick on people. I really want to say, guys, give me my money, because I can't. If you have some customers that aren't behaving themselves and you need to send them statements to say, give me my money, please, or maybe say that in nicer terms than what I say, we also have this nice new feature now that you can actually, from the customer card, oops, there we go, I'm going to pick on my Adam Park, and I can actually email a statement right from my customer card now. I don't have to go in there and create my statement and do everything else. I can email it right from my customer card. I don't have to go through all those routines. Unfortunately, if you still don't want historical transactions to show up, please remember you still have to do your paid transaction removal and still do your aging. Those routines are still necessary for statements, okay? But it does give us that nice luxury. We can email it right from our customer card. For any of you, let's flip over to purchasing and pick on some vendors. I feel like we've picked on customers too much. We might think that I'm a little too obsessed with getting money instead of paying money. All right. For those of you who've been doing purchase requisitions for a while and love them, they're quite great. One of the prior issues that we used to have is that we couldn't actually print a PO requisition so that we could hand it to our boss and say, please give this to me now, I want this. We now have a print button in the screen. It prints a standard report. It's just as beautiful as our POs out of the box. However, if you would like to have your PO requisition have your logos on it or any other modifications, please feel free to contact us. We can help you put those modifications in. Okay. These also do go to Word template as well. If you are using Word templates, entirely up to you. Okay. Now, while we're talking about purchasing, now this does happen in receivables too, but I specifically want to talk about purchasing. I'm sure we're all familiar with doing this payables transaction entry screen where we put in some invoices and put in some credit notes to those vendors. Now, I have gotten this question many, many times, and I'm sure Tammy has as well, is why do we get those pesky financial batches sitting in the financial level that say like PMTRX and some long number and PMCHQ and this long number, and we're going, these are all system generated batches. I hate them. Why are they here? I have to post them to get my month end to work. And we always tell you the answer, well, if you post it outside of a batch and you just hit post from this window, they're going to get stuck at the GL. Well, GP has finally said, you know what, enough is enough with that, guys. If you now notice in my posting setup, specifically, I now have the option that you notice that if I allow transaction posting, which is what allows that post button I had open, which is what allows this button to happen that I can post outside of a batch, I have this post through general ledger files. So I now can say, you know what, go ahead and post from the window, guys, if you really want to, and it's not going to create those pesky batches of the GL for me. It's going to post them all the way through, just like it does if I was to post it with a batch.
That must have been one of those user-requested functions that's sent off to the development team.
I am guessing so. I have also submitted that one myself. I can tell you that one because I hated those pesky batches, both as a consultant and both in my prior life. I always hated them because I always ended up at the end of the month going, I have all these transactions and now I have to post them, and I really hope I post them in the right period. There's all that debacle that goes with that. No one wants to hear that. Most of the other posting setup has stayed the same. Okay, so there's no big surprises there, but I am excited to tell you we do have the post through from the post window. Of course, if you want everything to go through a batch, which I'm a big pro supporter for everything going through a batch, you can tell me it's because I'm a little old school and I've been in GP too long, that's fine too, is we can actually disallow this by unchecking that allow transaction posting, and this post button will be grayed out. And that's totally your choice, guys. But we do have that post through general ledger files, which is exciting. While we're talking about batches, because, you know, I just love batches since I'm a pro batch supporter here. Reoccurring batches. If you're not using them, they're a great function in GP. It allows me to keep those standard batches of those bills that come every month and don't change much. Things like our utilities, phone bills, maybe some back charges you're doing between companies, all that fun stuff. We actually have this fun thing now that if you're using reoccurring batches, we can actually have this button here called Use Last Day of the Month. This is a new function of actually GP 2018 R1, not R2. Either way, it's a great function that I can actually check this off that it always defaults to the last day of the month. Whether that month has 31 days or 28 days or ends on the 30th, it will calculate to the last day of your month based on your period setup, okay? Now that we're all excited about batches, I really hope that we're posting inside of batches. And the reason why I'm always going to tell you to post inside of batches, in case you spill your coffee in your computer, which has never happened to me at Endeavour, which Scott might be laughing at me right now. We may have had to replace the carpet because of my coffee spills. Anyways, batches are easier to recover if you do post inside of them. Okay, guys? Let's go back to sales. When our customers don't behave themselves, we like to put them on hold for various reasons, you know. If you have a customer on hold, so let's go ahead and put a customer on hold because, you know, they didn't behave themselves. Now, you can actually put them all on hold or put multiple on hold from these navigation lists. If you aren't using navigation lists inside of GP, these are helpful, handy lists that you have both in inventory, sales, and purchasing. Allows you to do multiple things at once. I can select one or all or multiple. Little handy trick, if you need to enable emailing for multiple customers at once, this is a handy place to do it inside your navigation list. This is not a new feature to new GP. This actually came out a couple versions ago, but it is a hidden one. So I do like to tell you guys you can enable your emailing functions for your customers en masse and for your vendors. Don't feel left out if you work in AP. But if you notice here, I can put on that hold button. If I've selected my 3 customers here, and I can actually hit my apply hold. So I can put all 3 of these customers on hold at once. If you notice here, it actually does say that I've completed it and it didn't fail, which is great. But the great part of this now is when I apply those holds, I can also take them off hold all at once as well. I can also inactivate my multiple customers at once as well. So the new feature is that we can put multiple customers on hold. We used to have to go into each individual card, put them on hold, and go through. Now that we can do multiple. Now, you notice that I did put my Adam Park on hold previously. If I was to do an invoice for him, if I'm going to do an invoice for him, when I learn how to use a mouse, apparently, guys, and I'm going to pick on my Adam Park here, or Aaron Fitz, sorry, and now has a pop-up that says this was currently on hold. Do you still want to continue? And I say, yeah, I still want to continue. It used to be previously it waited till the end of the document to tell me that this guy was on hold. Now it tells me right up front, this guy's on hold, what do you want to do, continue or not? Which is great, you know? I want to know right up front if I need to go talk to someone and say, you know, they really want this order. Can I give it to them, yes or no? Which is a great plan. So now you can see that I actually do that, get that error message. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, which is not inside of a batch. So I broke my own rules here of not being in a batch, guys. Now, I am going to hand it over to Tammy now, who's going to talk about workflow. If you're not using workflow yet, it is a great function that actually came out in GP 2015. They have improved it several times over. And so I'm going to let Tammy go on about workflow, and she's going to show us what some of the new features are. And of course, if you have any questions about workflow or want to implement it, please feel free to reach out to Endeavour, and we can assist you with that as well.
Thank you, Brittany. All right, so as Brittany mentioned, workflow started a few versions ago, and the whole premise of it, the whole idea of it was if you had things that needed to be approved, I did some, let's start off with purchase orders, and I needed to get it approved. I would have to print my purchase orders, walk over to department's head, get them to sign a piece of paper for me, bring it back, and then I was able to continue purchasing. Well, we wanted to eliminate all of that, and auditors love workflow because what we can do is we can actually submit our purchase orders, or, well, it has expanded, but we can submit our purchase orders 2 ways. We can have a reminder come up, a notification come up for whoever the approver is, or it can go right to your inbox and email, and while somebody's off on the golf course, they can see, oh, I got something that needs to be approved. I can open up my, my phone, tap approval, and then the person who originated the workflow can then proceed with their work. Now, we do have to have web services enabled, but that is just amazing new feature right into GP that everybody should be able to use.
And this can also help with your SOX compliancy as well. If you have those SOX compliancies or those SOX audits where you actually have to prove that you signed them, GP can take over this function where it does time and date stamp and user stamp each time it goes out for approval and who approves it, and if it has been moved on to somebody else for approvals. So if any of you hate those audits where you're like, oh, I have to find a million pieces of paper where they're signed, Workflow can help you out with this one, and it does meet the technical requirements of those as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with what has been new, and the first one we'll talk about is to send reminder emails. So this would work if this utilizes the calendar, the workflow calendar, and the way the calendar works is, say I submit a workflow and I build in, it says this workflow is supposed to take 8 hours to complete, or the approver has 8 hours to approve my workflow. Well, what the reminder email does is you could actually state that 1 hour or however hour before the approval is due, please send a reminder email. So the way this looks is, I'm going to go into our workflow setup. So tools, setup, company, and right under workflow, maintenance.
And for those of you who don't like the drop-down menus, you can get through this to the administration windows on the left-hand side as well. As always, there's 6 ways to get to anything inside of GP. Whatever you're comfortable with, you do it your way. Perfect.
But as you said, I'm old school, so forgive my way of doing things.
It's okay. I go between both. I can't. For some, I still like the drop-down menus, and then I think to myself, man, I could have done this to the tiles, but I can't break the habit.
All right. So we talked about the reminder. So this is what I'm saying right here. I set up a little workflow here for purchases batches. So you can see here I have payables approval over 5,000, for example. So this is a condition that I put in. So if you have a workflow and you have internal policy, we can build rules in. But right at the bottom here, it puts a time limit. That's what we're referring to. So I gave Matthew 8 hours to approve my batches. It's going to apply my workflow calendar right here. So the clock starts ticking based on this calendar. And 1 hour before this approval is needed, Matthew gets an email, please, can you approve my work? And if you have built it in, then we can say, okay, what the escalation policy is after that.
What if Matthew's on vacation? Can I tend to give him to somebody else?
Absolutely. There is a workflow delegation that we can put in that says anytime a workflow is assigned to a particular person, they can set up this. It's almost like an out-of-the-box.
Office?
Out of office, I'm sorry. Thank you, Scott. Out of office, and it works the same way with workflow.
Yeah, Matthew's always out of the box. Don't worry.
Thinking out of the box.
All right, the next one we have is a new added workflow under the financial module over here. So you'll see here there is a GL ledger account approval. So if you have new GLs that are added, you could actually have this approved. So where I could use this, for example, is maybe I want to make sure that something is classified properly. So I want maybe a second pair of eyes to take a look at this new GL here. So when I can actually, the way I did this is I can set up verified distribution, so I can set up tasks for this as well, which is a great way. So a lot of times we talk about approvals, but we can also set up tasks that have to be done. So I've set up one here for a new GL account, and I have a task that says, okay, verify that the coding is correct. Make sure that it aligns where it needs to be on my chart of accounts. Once that is assigned to a particular person, Matthew has a lot of work, so Matthew has to do that. That is done to make sure that's done. And once these tasks are done, you can see that it's a step flow that I can do. So the first one is verified distribution. Once that task is done, it goes on to the next task, update the, for example, MR. That's the second task. You can see it follows the verified distribution. And then finally, approve the account. So this is the final approval. So then maybe it goes back to the head, the controller, and they just approve that everything's okay. They can see that all the previous tasks have been done, and then you can now approve it. Unless this new account has been approved, anything that's using it will not post, right? So it stops it right there.
So those of you who are doing fund accounting, this is actually a fantastic one for you. You know, we set up new funds and we have to go through all the approvals and make sure we have the GLs that are set up with those funds to deal with them. This can now help you with that functionality to say, you know what, those funds cannot be set up in our accounting system until we have final approval. So that will make you compliant for your various audits as well.
Perfect. So the next new workflow feature that was added was vendor approval. All right, so it's an extension of the purchasing module here. I enjoy this one because to prevent fraud, you don't want somebody who's an AP going and creating a fraudulent vendor and doing just that, paying themselves, or going into an existing vendor and changing possibly the banking information, EFTs. So even though you think you're paying the vendor, it's actually going to be deposited into their account. I don't want to say mine, because I feel like you start going into accounts, and that's when you start thinking about how you could defraud, right? All the possible ways. So what we did was, our GP did, Microsoft did, was to add this vendor approval to help with fraud prevention in that way. So every time you set up a new vendor, you can run this approval process, so somebody gets to see this vendor. You could also add, we'll talk about that a little bit later, we could probably add a document attachment there for a new vendor. We could probably, if they have EFT, and they allowed us to directly pay them through our banking, we could probably store that as well. So this is quite a handy new feature for that. Okay, just a note as well with vendors. Now you can still sort of set up, you can create a new vendor, you can start entering invoices for it. So it doesn't stop it that way. Where the stop comes is when you're ready to post. All right, so you can still work, but until that vendor is approved, whatever batch, whatever transaction that's using that vendor won't post. All right. So we also want to look at the sales transaction workflow. So we're going to move over to sales. Okay. So we had receivable batches, which was 2015, but here's the new SOP batches as well. So I created one called credit limits. Okay. So this is how you could use it. For example, if I had a vendor a customer, and they were exceeding their credit limit, I could put a condition that says, if you've exceeded, or this customer is going to exceed, it needs approval. And what's really nice about this is that I'm just going to expand it. What's really nice about it is that when you're entering that, those comments, you could actually enter why this customer is going to exceed, or why they're exceeding their credit limit. So to show you, just demonstrate that really quickly, I'm just going to go to sales transaction over here. All right, so this here you can see here, there's a credit limit over here. And what we talked about is, say, view history. So when I was submitting my workflow, I can actually type in the reason why the customer's exceeding their credit limit. In my case, they received special funding to pay up front. All right, so that's something that's built right into the workflow history, and this document here, this workflow history is something that can be printed and again submitted to auditors. You can see here that it was submitted. We can see when the action was, the due date, and who did it, and of course I was the one who originated, but whoever originated this workflow, it will be time-stamped here as well. Perfect. All right, edit list attachment is a workflow. Okay, so this is really neat, especially when you have, for example, my colleague Brittany was talking about having journal entries and wanting to include, for example, GL batches and having the edit list, flow through. So when somebody's approving maybe their entries, that they can actually see what the edit list is. So they can view a little bit more detail of these transactions to give them a little bit more information as regarding what they're approving. Okay, so in order to enable that, we are going to you have to enable, this is sort of the precursor, you have to enable document attachments. Over here, right, it's about 2 steps above the workflow. So document attachments, so you can actually see here, allow document attachment. And right at the bottom here, it says send attachments in email. Okay, so when you've done this now, if we're going to go back to our workflow, maintenance, I'm going to go back and click on purchases again.
Again, with the paying people.
I like paying people. Right at the bottom here, you see here, include document attachments. So when you set up the workflow, you click on this and include the Word template. So you do have to have your Word templates enabled for this to work. And what happens when you send that, submit that workflow, the edit list is also available for the approver. It's also sent in the email as well.
So Tammy, when we help people do their workflows, it looks like this is pretty easy with just a bunch of clicks. It's really the planning and mapping out of the process that takes more of the time?
That is correct, Scott. So I like to call it the plan, the chart, the execute. I have a nice little roadmap of how I do workflows. I also, you start with your policy. What's your internal policy? Even how you run it by paper. Like you have in paper, you say, okay, if it's over 5,000, who approves something? If it's over 100,000, maybe you need the CFO as well as the CEO to approve it. So that's something that I sit down and you start planning it. Then I start charting it. Excel works really great. I'm also a very visual person. So using a Visio diagram is also really good because you can actually put the arrow zone, say, very definitively, what are your rules? And once you have a very clear idea of how your rules operate within your own organization, the workflow part is simple. I will then just translate what that Visio diagram or what that chart says and put it into workflow.
Okay. And then if you're using workflow, say every once in a while there's something that just doesn't fit into those rules. Can you circumvent the workflow, or once you turn it on, you have to use it?
It depends on, of course we can break some rules, but only if you are an administrator or SA. Those are the only people who can break rules inside of GP.
Okay.
So typically we only want those to sit with 1 or 2 people because we don't want people to break those rules. We do know that there's always going to be that one-time scenario where things are going to be messy, it breaks all of our rules, but we're doing it just because, and that's what it's going to be. That's where we're going to go to our administrator and go through those proper channels and say, you know what, this is our special situation. Can you help us break the rules inside of GP? So yes, there are always those times, but they have to be through an administrator, and we want it to go through those multiple channels. If you want to break those rules, it should be escalated to that administrator, and then they can then help you out to circumvent those rules for those one-off situations.
And is their name in the audit trail?
Well, yes.
Okay, thanks set.
Absolutely. All right, so we only have one final workflow that we wanted to talk about, and this is called the 3 steps of POP. So again, under purchasing, we have here purchase order approval. So this, the way I sort of visualize this is if I have a department head, I have maybe 7 different departments. I have marketing, I have IT, I have engineering, for example. Those department heads need to have control over or some sort of insight of what's being purchased within their department. Maybe they have budgetary rules, for example. So I can visualize that when a PO is being put out, that I want to get maybe approval from a department head. So we can set the purchase order to have those sort of rules built in. The next step when you have a PO is the receiving. Okay, so this is where receive the goods or receive the services, for example. And for this now, it's different. So if it's goods, I may necessarily maybe want the warehouse manager to make sure that those goods, everything's put in place. We actually did receive it. Everything was checked off. Maybe there's a rule or a task that says, these specialty items maybe need to have maybe checked for critical damage, whatever the case is. So the warehouse manager really maybe has to have ownership of receiving, and maybe also the finance team maybe wants to double check the distribution to make sure that it's coded correctly. So we can have it set up a rule that it goes to 2 places. Receiving goes to maybe a warehouse manager somewhat, and then a separate task or approval goes then to finance. And finally, the final step of POP is purchasing invoice. So this is where we've received the goods, and now we've received, the vendor has sent us the invoice. So this is purely finance, right? So they want to make sure, okay, now they can see that these items probably went to a proper channel. They double check to make sure that the invoice is correct, and number 1, that everything is coded properly, because they are in control of the financial statements and making sure that things get posted in GL in the correct place. So again, we have the 3 steps of POP, and that's the final aspect of workflow. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass this back on to Scott.
Let's go into Chrome. We do have a guide on our website. You can find us at Dynamics GP 2018 Upgrade Canada. As long as you type in Canada, you usually always find Endeavour. Here we are, number 1. So on our website, we do have this PDF here, and you can open up the PDF. Today's webinar, we're going to post it here on the top of the page. This is last year's webinar on what was new in GP 2018. Also, we were talking about the suggested enhancements and requests by users that go off to Microsoft. I have a link in the top right of our web page. This will take you to Microsoft, and our consultants periodically send over great ideas, and many other clients do as well. And it's fun to see what's coming down the pipeline. I'm told last time I was talking to some of the developers in Fargo at Microsoft that they read this on a monthly basis and are constantly using it for ideas and adding it to the roadmap of future enhancements to Dynamics GP. So we're always love to hear that.
And they also take a vote as well. So the most highly submitted ones, they actually take a vote on them as well.
Internally, or we get to vote too?
No, I wish we got to vote. No, it's internally. I found that out the other day, that they actually take a vote about, they rank their top ones that come in throughout the year, and they do a vote. So how cool is that?
That is pretty cool. I'm just going to click on this PDF quickly, and you can get an idea of some of the stuff that's here. So this is a capabilities guide that covers off recurring batches, transaction levels, and there's also a website around some of the other what's new stuff that has a recap between 2013, 2015, 2016, 2018. Quite fun to go through. So let's go back to our PowerPoint, talk about next steps with 3 minutes to go. So for next steps, all service and support requests can include support@endeavorsolutions.ca. You can email them directly or CC them, and that goes into our internal tracking system to make sure that everyone and their requests are dealt with in a timely and appropriate fashion. You can also reach out directly to Trish. Trish on our team is a client relationship manager. She deals with many of the GP upgrade quotes and options. And when it comes to an upgrade, there are two fashions. One is a straight upgrade, take my system, put in the new pieces, and give me a little half day of what's new training. Or you can do more of a strategic upgrade, and that's taking a step back and looking at some of the areas for optimization, for process improvement, for workflow, and mapping out what else can we do to be bigger, better, faster versions of ourselves. Is there third-party products we should consider? Are there other benchmarks and heuristics that we want to invoke to get more out of GP 2018 and service your organization for the next 5 or 10 years? So with that in mind, thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And if there are any questions, reach out to support or contact us through the chat window after this presentation. Thank you. Is there a way to void a list of checks in 2018?
There actually always has been this trick to void multiple checks. If you had a bunch of checks in a batch and you said process already, let me just flip over to our GP here. Just give me 2 seconds. Let's flip into GP. Since we're really into paying people here.
And I have 4 more questions after that.
Oh, it is going to be a great day today. All right. So if we're in that typical void historical transactions, because typically our checks automatically go, checks have this nice little trick that typically if you did a batch of checks or EFTs, you'll actually see them all in a row. Just don't put your vendor ID here. You can actually end up selecting more than one of these at once as you go down, and you'll see them all kind of grouped together. You just got to find that group, then check off the ones you want in a group and hit void. You could void 10, 20, 30, as many as you need to in that and all together. And that because they all were produced at the same time, they'll be in that batch sequentially for you. So you just have to find them. They're usually the last ones, but that trick's always been there for you. So hopefully that helps you out.
Great. Oh, we've opened up the floodgates.
All right.
Can we upgrade straight from 2013 up to 2018?
Yes, you can. However, you're going to have to do a 2-step upgrade. What that means is that when you go from 2013 to 2018, the technical team here at Endeavour will actually take you from 2013 to 2016 and then from 2016 to 2018. The reason we do a 2-step upgrade is to make sure that all your data is correct. We're not going to have any corruption, which is why we don't do a straight upgrade. We actually do a 2-step upgrade. From your side, you won't notice anything. It's just something we do to make sure that we have all your data there. Nothing's going to get corrupted, so it is a 2-step upgrade.
And it's even a test upgrade first and then put it into production. And
100%.
we do this all the time, and there's lots of clients that do significant jumps. Next, where are we able to get that roadmap? The roadmap I showed is on our website, so if you Google Endeavour Solutions, Dynamics GP 2018, add the word Canada, Toronto, Halifax, Montreal. We're typically first, second, and third on your Google results. Thank you, Brittany. For workflow, do we need to set up email to sync with GP?
Yes, you need your email to be working with GP. That was the portion that Tammy had actually said if your web services needs to be enabled, and we can help you out with that one. If you're emailing from GP, yes, it does help, but a lot of workflow actually works off of your Active Directory. So as long as you have an email associated with your Active Directory and web services is turned on, you can go ahead and start using workflow.
Okay.
If there is no email, though, like there is, when you open your GP, we can also add workflow tasks as well. So the first thing that it'll tell you to do, like if you have reminders or tasks to do, they get listed there, and then you can approve them right as soon as you open Great Plains as well.
Okay. Back to the void checks, just a quick clarification. This client was referring to checks that may not be sequential, like stale dated checks.
Unfortunately, in that case, you're actually going to have to find them in there, but you can still select multiple at once in that void transaction window.
Okay, that's not too bad. Is there a way to refund a credit card through GP?
Yes and no. If you're refunding a credit card, you can actually, what we call in GP 2018, it refunds a payment. So as long as you have your credit card set up as a payment type, yes, you can do a refund that way. If not, you'll be doing it in the traditional way of issuing out a credit note and then doing a financial transaction.
Okay. Something about workflow approvals for vendor cards.
Can you do them? Yes, for sure. You can have a workflow based on your vendor card. Tammy did review that. So if you have a vendor and you create a new vendor or you make a modification, so let's say we're talking about creating a new vendor. If we want to create a new vendor, I'm going to create myself here.
And so be clear, this also works for editing or modifying vendors.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So as soon as this vendor goes in, I made myself a vendor here. As soon as this vendor goes in, I can enter as many transactions as I want for that, but those transactions will not post for that vendor until it's been approved. I don't know who my approver is, but whoever my approver is has to approve my vendor.
Great. Oh, here's one other one. Is there a shortage report by bill of materials?
Quantity shortage report? I'm assuming we're using manufacturing in this question.
For bill of materials? Yeah, I assume so.
Yeah, for bill of materials, yes, you do have that option. It is a little bit of funky. You can pull that information a couple different ways in GP. You can actually use the SSRS reports that come out of the box, or you can actually create a SmartList that'll do this for you. If you want some help doing that, please feel free to reach out. That can actually be a bigger discussion on that one to see how detailed or not detailed you want to go with that transaction. And details being, do you want to see your quantity shortage for all your warehouses at once, for each individual warehouse, for your main part and then list it down, or for your individual components? In that case, please feel free to reach out to us. We can help you sort out that report. But yes, GP can do that for you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, everyone, for staying an extra 6 minutes today to participate in these questions and answers. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to hearing from you and having you join us in the future. Bye for now.